The wind howled through the narrow streets of Cork that winter morning in 1992. The old church of St. Bridget stood silent under a pale gray sky, its stone walls damp with mist. Father Michael Byrne was the first to notice something unusual, a faint, desperate cry cutting through the wind. He turned toward the gate, and there, resting in a wicker basket wrapped in a thin blue blanket, was a newborn baby. For a moment, he froze. The child's tiny hands trembled in the cold. There was no note, no clue, only that worn blue blanket and a wooden cross tied gently to his wrist with a piece of string. Father Michael whispered a prayer under his breath, lifted the baby into his arms, and carried him into the church. The authorities searched for the mother for weeks, but no one came forward. The newspapers called him the church gate boy. He had no name, no birth record, no one to claim him. Eventually, the child was placed under the care of the local orphanage. The sisters there called him the Little Miracle, for he had survived a freezing night alone. 6 months later, a couple from the nearby town, Patrick and Mary O'Connell, arrived at the orphanage. They couldn't have children, but when Mary held the boy for the first time, she burst into tears. "He's ours," she said softly. And from that day, the boy was known as Liam O'Connell. Liam grew up surrounded by love. Patrick taught him to ride a bicycle on the cobblestone roads near the river, while Mary baked brown bread that filled their small kitchen with warmth. But every Sunday, when they attended Mass at St. Bridget's, Liam's gaze would always drift to the church gate, the same one where his life had begun. He didn't know why, but something about it pulled at his heart. As the years passed, the mystery of his origin lingered like a whisper he could never quite hear. On his 10th birthday, Mary gave him the blue blanket. "It's the only thing you had when they found you," she said, her eyes glistening. Liam traced his fingers over its frayed edges, wondering who had wrapped him in it. When he entered his teenage years, the questions grew louder. Who had left him there? Why? And why was there no name? No note? Nothing. Some villagers still spoke in hushed tones about that winter night, about a young woman seen crying near the church gates, her face hidden by a scarf. But no one ever said more. By the time Liam turned 20, he had learned to silence those thoughts. He built a quiet life, studied history, and became a teacher. Yet every time he passed the church, he felt the same cold tug in his chest, as if the past were trying to reach him. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Liam stopped by the churchyard. The light was golden, the air crisp. He placed his hand on the old iron gate, feeling its chill seep into his skin. "Who were you?" he murmured, not to himself, but to the shadow of the past that still lingered there. He didn't know that the answer he sought had been waiting all along, hidden in a torn letter, buried deep in the dust of forgotten records. And when that letter finally came to light, 33 years later, it would turn his world upside down. But for now, the church gate stood silent, guarding its secret. If you were in Liam's place, would you want to uncover your past, even if it might hurt? Tell us in the comments below and stay until the end of this story. The truth will shock you. The years passed gently in Cork. Liam's life seemed ordinary from the outside. A good student, quiet, polite, always respectful. But inside, he carried a storm of questions that never truly faded. Every birthday felt incomplete, every family photo like a beautiful painting with one missing corner. Mary and Patrick never hid the truth from him. "You were a gift," Mary would say, "found at the church gate. A miracle, Liam." And though her voice was full of love, those words echoed through his mind at night. Found. At the church gate. To Liam, that didn't sound like a beginning. It sounded like a mystery. When he was 15, Liam began volunteering at St. Bridget's on weekends, cleaning the pews and helping Father Michael with small tasks. The old priest had grown frail, but his eyes still carried the same warmth as the day he'd found the baby. Sometimes Liam would catch him staring at the gate with an unreadable expression. One afternoon, while they polished the silver chalices in the sacristy, Liam asked softly, "Father, do you remember the night I was found?" The priest paused, his hand trembling slightly. "I do, my boy. I remember it every time I walk by that gate. Did you ever see anyone? Anything?" Father Michael hesitated. Only footprints in the snow. Small ones. A woman's, I believe. They led toward the forest road, and then disappeared. Liam said nothing more, but his heart pounded. That image, a woman's footprints vanishing into the night, haunted him for years. After Father Michael passed away, Liam visited his grave every winter. The church, once alive with bells and candles, grew quieter with time. By his late 20s, Liam had become a history teacher at the local school, admired for his patience and calm nature. Yet, even as he spoke to his students about the past, he could not escape his own. Sometimes, while grading papers late at night, he would unfold the old blue blanket and stare at it under the dim light of his desk lamp. The fabric had faded, but it carried a faint scent. Something floral, maybe lavender. "Who were you?" he would whisper again. One day, as he visited an old family friend in the village, he overheard two elderly women talking near the bakery. "Do you remember that night? The baby by the church gate?" one asked. The other nodded. "Aye. They said a young woman was seen crying there. Some said she was from Kinsale, others that she was the daughter of a local farmer." Liam froze. For the first time in his life, he had heard a clue that pointed beyond the gate itself. That evening, he brought the story up to Mary, but she shook her head gently. "Oh, Liam, some stories belong to the past. We should be grateful for the life we have." Her words were kind, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear, as if she knew more than she wished to admit. Still, the curiosity had taken root. He began visiting the local library, searching through old newspaper archives from 1992. There were small articles about the church gate baby, but no mention of anyone connected to him. Just a single line caught his attention. Father Michael reported finding the infant with a blue blanket and a wooden cross tied to his wrist. No note was discovered. Liam frowned. No note. But he had always wondered if something might have been lost that night, something the wind had carried away, or that time had hidden. As the church aged and the orphanage closed, the records were moved to an old building on the edge of town. Liam didn't know it yet, but that dusty archive would soon give him the piece he had searched for all his life, a torn letter, half buried between pages, holding the name he was never meant to know. The past was waiting for him, and this time it would not stay silent. It was a rainy afternoon in early spring when Liam finally decided to visit the old orphanage. The building had been abandoned for years, its windows boarded, its walls coated in moss and silence. A few stray cats prowled around the courtyard, and the iron gate groaned as he pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old paper. Shafts of light filtered through broken glass, catching the faint outlines of forgotten cribs and wooden toys. The place felt both sacred and tragic, the cradle of beginnings for many lost lives, including his own. He had received permission from the local council to review old records for an educational project. But truthfully, his purpose was far more personal. He wanted to find any document, any hint, that could tell him something about that winter morning in 1992. Room after room, he searched through boxes of yellowed files, birth certificates, baptism records, adoption papers. Hours passed. The rain outside softened into a gentle drizzle. Then, near dusk, he found a heavy, leather-bound ledger with the words, "St. Brigid's Children, 1989-1994. His hands trembled as he turned the pages. There it was. Male infant, found January 4, 1992, adopted by Patrick and Mary O'Connell. No given name, no birth information. But just beneath the entry, something unusual caught his eye. A thin piece of paper tucked between the pages, half hidden under the binding. He carefully pulled it free. The paper was torn and stained, as though someone had once tried to destroy it. The handwriting was faint but legible. "If you ever find this boy, please tell him his name is Seamus. He was never unwanted, only unprotected. M." Liam's breath caught. Seamus. The word echoed through his mind like a forgotten melody. His name, or the name someone had once given him. And the signature, just the letter M. His heart raced as he tried to piece together the mystery. Who was M? His mother? A caretaker? Someone who had tried to send a message that never reached him? He sat in the dim room staring at the torn edges of the letter, realizing it must have been hidden deliberately, as if someone had wanted to protect the secret, not reveal it. That night he couldn't sleep. He placed the letter beside the blue blanket on his desk and studied them under the soft glow of the lamp. Together, they were the only clues left by a woman who had vanished decades ago. The next morning, he went to visit the church once more. He found the caretaker sweeping the courtyard, an old man who had worked there for more than 40 years. Liam showed him the letter. The caretaker adjusted his glasses and frowned. "This writing, it looks familiar," he murmured. "I remember Father Michael receiving something like this once, and a letter he never spoke about. Said it wasn't his to share." Liam's pulse quickened. "Do you remember who brought it?" The man hesitated. "A young woman. Brown hair. She cried the whole time. She said she couldn't stay." The pieces began to fit together, though painfully slowly. A young woman, footprints in the snow, a letter addressed to a boy named Seamus. It wasn't coincidence. It was a story buried by shame and time. Determined, Liam decided to track down the origins of the letter. The handwriting, the paper, the phrasing, everything suggested it was written by someone educated, careful, and desperate. After days of research, he discovered the paper came from a small stationery shop that had closed decades earlier, in a seaside village called Ardmore, nearly 100 kilometers away. And so, with the torn letter in his pocket and the blue blanket folded carefully beside him, Liam set out on a journey toward the Irish coast, to find Em, the person who might finally tell him who he was. He didn't yet know that the truth waiting for him there would change every memory he'd ever held dear. The road to Ardmore wound along the Irish coastline, where cliffs met restless waves and seagulls cried above the gray horizon. Liam drove in silence, the torn letter resting on the passenger seat beside the blue blanket. Two fragile witnesses to a secret that had survived 3 decades. He reached the village by dusk. It was small and quiet, its houses painted in faded pastels, the smell of salt in the air. At the local inn, an old woman with kind eyes gave him a room. When he mentioned that he was searching for someone who might have lived there in the early 90s, her expression changed. "There aren't many left from those years," she said softly. "But if you're looking for stories, talk to Margaret Flynn. She lives up on the hill, knows everyone's past, whether they like it or not." The next morning, Liam climbed the narrow road that led to a small cottage overlooking the sea. A garden of wildflowers surrounded it, and smoke curled gently from the chimney. When he knocked, a frail voice called, "Come in." Inside, the room smelled of peat fire and old books. An elderly woman sat by the window wrapped in a shawl, her eyes sharp despite her age. "You must be the O'Connell boy," she said before he could even speak. Liam froze. "How do you know who I am?" She smiled faintly. "Because I've been waiting 33 years for someone to come asking." He sat across from her, his hands shaking. "I found a letter," he said, showing it to her. "It mentions my name, Seamus, and it's signed with an M. Do you know who wrote it?" Margaret's eyes softened with something between sorrow and relief. "Aye. That letter was written by my sister, Marie Flynn. She was your mother." Liam felt the air leave his lungs. The words hit him like a wave, powerful, unstoppable, undeniable. "My mother," he whispered. Margaret nodded slowly. "She was barely 19 when she had you. Our family was strict, proud. Our father was a parish councilman, and when he found out she was pregnant out of wedlock, he sent her away, said the child would bring shame." Her voice trembled as she continued. "She gave birth in secret, at a friend's cottage near Cork. But when she tried to keep you, our father forced her to leave you at the church. Said the church would give you a better life than she ever could. That night she wrote the letter. She wanted you to know your name, Seamus Flynn. But when she tried to hand it to Father Michael, our father stopped her. He tore it apart, only a piece survived." Liam's eyes filled with tears. For years, he had imagined abandonment as rejection, but now he saw it for what it was. Heartbreak, disguised as sacrifice. "She came back every year," Margaret said softly. "Every January, She left flowers by that gate. Blue ones, the same color as your blanket. Father Michael told me once that she prayed for you every Sunday right until the day she passed. Liam could barely speak. She's gone? Margaret nodded. 5 years now. Cancer. But she never stopped hoping you'd forgive her, even though you never knew. Silence filled the room. Only the sound of the sea, crashing gently beyond the window, gave the moment breath. Margaret reached for a small wooden box beside her chair. She left this for you, she said. Inside, wrapped in faded paper, was a photograph. A young woman with kind eyes and dark hair holding a blue blanket. On the back, in the same delicate handwriting as the letter, were the words, "My Seamus, forgive me when you find this." Liam held the photo close to his chest. The ache in his heart felt both unbearable and beautiful. The weight of a love he'd never known, yet had always felt. Margaret placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. She loved you more than anything, boy. Don't let her story end in sorrow. Let it end in peace. As Liam stepped outside, the sea breeze brushed against his face. He looked toward the horizon, the photograph still in his hand. For the first time, the question that had haunted him all his life, "Who am I?" finally had an answer. But there was still one thing left to do, one place he had to return to. The gate, where everything had begun. The road back to Cork felt different this time. Softer, quieter, as if the land itself recognized that something long buried had finally been unearthed. The torn letter now rested whole in Liam's mind, no longer just a mystery, but a bridge between who he was and who he had always been. When he reached St. Brigid's, the evening light painted the old church in gold. The gate, rusted, weathered, but still standing, seemed to breathe with history. He parked the car, stepped out, and walked slowly toward it, his heart heavy with both grief and peace. In his hands he carried 3 things: the blue blanket, the photograph of Mered, and a small bouquet of bluebells, the same flowers she had once left there every January. He knelt by the gate and placed the flowers gently on the cold stone. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint sound of church bells from somewhere far away. For a moment he imagined her, a frightened 19-year-old girl standing in that same spot 33 years earlier, clutching her newborn son and whispering a prayer she hoped would reach heaven. "I found you, Mum," he whispered, "and I forgive you." The words came out shakily at first, but once spoken, they filled the silence like light filling a dark room. A tear slid down his cheek, and for the first time in his life it felt like the gate was open, not the iron one before him, but the one inside him that had always been locked. He sat there for a long while, watching the sky shift from gold to silver. He thought about Margaret, about the woman his mother had been forced to hide, and about the couple who had raised him with kindness and love. In that moment he realized something powerful. He had not one family, but 2. The one that gave him life, and the one that gave him love. Later that night he wrote a letter of his own. He placed it inside the church, beside a candle that flickered in the quiet hall. It read, "To whoever finds this, I was once the boy left by this gate. My name is Liam, though once it was Seamus. I was found by love, raised by love, and forgiven by love. If you carry pain from the past, don't let it define you. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it sets your heart free." When he stepped outside, the stars had begun to appear one by one. He looked up at them and smiled, a man complete. As he turned to leave, a young couple walked past, pushing a stroller. The baby inside reached out and laughed, and for a brief moment, Liam felt the world fold in on itself, a perfect circle of beginnings and endings. He walked away from the gate without looking back, because he didn't need to anymore. The past was no longer a wound, it was a story, one he could finally tell without pain. And perhaps that is what life truly is, not a search for where we began, but an acceptance of where love has brought us. Would you have gone back to the place where your life began, even if it meant reopening every scar? What would you say if you could forgive someone from your past? If this story touched your heart, leave a heart in the comments. Share it with someone who believes in second chances, and don't forget to subscribe for more real emotional stories like this one.